Very good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, thanks very much to Ray and the NewMR team for inviting us to share what we see happening in the marketplace. I'm delighted to be here. For those of you that haven't done an activity with the NewMR team, I'm just very impressed by the professionalism. Sorry about the glitch we're experiencing, but I'm going to blame it on the technical side rather than your organization side, because I've been super impressed by the professionalism with how this has come together. Let me start by saying that in 2017, we finally started to see some what I'd call scalable traction, with the idea that market research is not a neutral party, but rather that the participant experience really is part of the customer experience. And that's something from our perspective and what we're seeing with our customers, people are starting to embrace the idea that it either can contribute or detract to the overall experience customers have with your brand and the opinion they have about your brand. And again, that's something that many of us have been advocating for a while, but has been very difficult to really get scalable traction on. And as we see that, one of the things personally that's I would say been frustrating is the pace at which that has evolved. And I think a lot of us in the industry, if you read the blogs, talk about how slowly some things move in our space. And one of the things that I've come to appreciate just in the last few years, as we've watched our platform be integrated across a number of customer businesses, is sometimes we don't appreciate the huge task that is involved for our customers, really, as they transform their businesses to become truly customer-centric and to be insight-driven. I mean, they reach across every area of the business. In some cases, deploying new methodology or new solutions can take, months, if not years, for them to really internalize and train the organization. And so while from a kind of a research perspective or a supplier perspective, we say, hey, we've got these new tools, why don't we try them? We have to be appreciative of the fact that our customers have to train thousands, if not tens of thousands of people to actually use them, to use the insights, to use the tools, et cetera. So it does take a while. But once the inflection point happens, we start to see some pretty interesting trends. And I want to share three that we're seeing right now. The first of which is the benchmark for the research experience. Again, going back to the idea that the research experience is now part of the customer experience. Customers aren't comparing their research experience to other surveys or other survey activities. The truth of the matter is that we are being held to a much higher standard, and that is the best customer experiences that are out there. So when we think about deploying research, deploying surveys or activities, we need to keep in mind that we're not being compared to other surveys, or we don't even have a get out of jail free card because this is research. It's quite different. Customers don't always understand that, and instead they're measuring the experience or evaluating it based on all the other types of digital customer experiences they might have, which means we have to up our game in terms of really being best of breed. In that same sense, customers also know the value of the information they're providing. They're seeing it in the marketplace. We're asking them to help us solve a product problem, create a new product, evaluate a new advertisement that's going to scale globally or something like that. So the idea that they're starting to get an appreciation for the value that they're contributing to our organizations, our customer organizations, is changing the expectation about what we deliver back and what value they actually get from participating. And that value is starting to shift from, the monetary incentives, if we will, to truly expecting to get some intelligence and information back from the experience they're contributing to. And so I think as we see it in particular, if you think about yourself as a participant, knowing the type of impact that you might be having on an organization by participating in any number of activities, that organization is now accumulating quite a bit of intelligence or knowledge about you, as also about their business. And so the expectation is evolving toward actually getting access to some of that intelligence and to the impact that we're actually having. If you think about it as individuals, we're intelligence driven just the way organizations are. And yet we don't have the budgets that a lot of the major companies around the world have to invest in intelligence, to learning more about us. We're part of that process, and we are starting to expect to get access to some of that intelligence. So really, that's the first big shift we've seen, is just the expectation of the exchange of intelligence with your customers has pivoted dramatically to really being a two-way exchange of value. And that's the expectation that customers move into an activity with. The second trend we see is something we talk a lot about in across the industry, which is this democratization of the market research function, if you will. And I think the difference that we've seen recently is that virtually none of our customers are entering into activities without trying to solve for some sort of a variable, a data point, a metric that exists somewhere else in the enterprise. So the market research function, which 15, 20 years ago used to be siloed, or we even used to use that function to collect certain KPIs or metrics, those now exist in all sorts of places in the enterprise. Transactional data, behavioral data, operational data. And we look at the research function now as more of a solve for function, which is, this is happening somewhere in the enterprise. I have this data point. How can we use the research activity to actually diagnose, explain, and act upon whatever that trend or data point is across the business? And as that happens, it will be incumbent upon the research and the intelligence functions to get access to all the different sources of intelligence that actually can provide those explanations and that directional intelligence. So we're talking about the fusion then of all sorts of information from social, from traditional market research means, from your NPS scores, and all the other engagements that you have along that customer experience. It's all being brought together. I think a lot of people would say we've been seeing this anticipating this for 5, 10 years, if you will. The difference is now we're seeing researchers, again, being expected to grab data from other places, to understand them, and then to use their craft to diagnose, explain, and enrich those data points that are happening in the organization. So it is the integration of both the research function and really the rest of the data-driven intelligence function around the enterprise. And then the third thing we see as a result, if you just think about all the sources of intelligence that we're actually being asked to dig into, is that we're evolving from a function in which we used to learn from our customers, just asking them questions, listening to them. And then we started to bring those data together, and we were learning more about them by bringing more intelligence and more context to the flow of information from them. And this third component now is actually delivering and sharing value back to them. And that sharing of value back with your customers is actually driving a stronger customer relationship. And I would say, as I watch the industry kind of defend its value, we're evolving from a world where the value used to be on contributing insight that would be used in a decision along with all sorts of other data points. That's an indirect benefit. Sometimes that's a little difficult to explain or defend, if you will. And what we're seeing in this process of actually starting to connect the streams of data back to customers, this building of relationships is actually starting to have a direct impact on corporate metrics like retention, like revenue, like lifetime customer value. Yes, there's still intelligence flowing that informs decisions, but simultaneously, we're also seeing the process itself starting to influence those metrics directly. And that becomes a very, very defensible position because it's influencing metrics that CFOs, CMOs, and CEOs care about directly. So while, if I look back 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I grew up in the industry, and we really kind of were trained in a world in which we were trying to measure without influencing. We're now seeing an evolution where the industry, or really even our customers, embracing the idea that the research function has a role in the customer experience, that it has a responsibility to drive a positive branded experience, and that if we're doing that right, we are actually then positively impacting the relationships that our customers have with their customers. Again, it's just something, we had a report recently that was produced by Forrester in which they reached out to a number of our customers, and the impact that our customers were talking about in that report relative to those corporate KPIs just makes their lives a lot easier when it comes to actually explaining the increase in scope or the opportunity that the research function has to contribute. And from my perspective, whereas we debate back and forth about whether we're seeing the contraction or the pressure on the market research function, are we seeing a compression in the industry? We see just the reverse. We are seeing our customers having an impact on every aspect of the business and being asked to bring the attitudes, the emotions, the intentional data into explaining and enriching all of those different sources of data that exist in the enterprise. And so that battle that used to happen, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when we were analyzing whether big data would replace the market research function, we're actually starting to see just the reverse now, in which the research function now is embracing the big data and being responsible for making more sense of it. So we see it as a very, very positive development. It is a change from the way that the rules of the craft used to be, but we see it dramatically positively impacting the opportunity for the function across the enterprise and the space in general. So with that, I'll pause. Again, thanks very much for us sharing, getting a chance to share our perspective. Happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Scott. That was wonderful. We've got some questions coming in, and so let's just turn to them now. But if you're out there and you've got questions, please move quickly. So here's the first one, Scott. Are market researchers part of the solution for activating change, or are they part of the problem? And if they are part of the problem, what's the key incentive to get researchers to want to change?
All right. Let me give a quick answer, which is going to walk the fine line of being politically incorrect. We debate this quite a bit. Ultimately, I think there's been a belief that researchers just are slow to change. I think it's as much the information that the ultimate customers are trying to consume, because we've instilled these methodologies, these metrics in the organization. We've gotten our customers to rely upon them. And so as a result, despite the fact that a research provider might want to change, or even a researcher in an organization might want to change, we've been so successful in instilling our metrics that when we say, hey, it's time for us to change, the organization is kind of going, well, wait a minute. We just changed a couple years ago. We don't really want to go through this whole change again. If you think back to my opening remarks about the appreciation I now have for how complicated it is for a large company to truly become customer-centric across all the touch points. So my view is that we need to do a better job of helping our end customers illustrate the direct impact that call it the new ideas and the changes we want to make can have on their businesses. But there is also a little bit of patience we need to show, an appreciation for the fact that when we do bring a change like that into an organization, we have to appreciate the fact it could take months or even years for the organization to truly internalize those new metrics or those new methodologies we're bringing in. So I don't think anymore it's as much the fault of the researcher. It's just a reality of most of the revenue in the industry comes from large organizations that need time to train and internalize the tools that we're developing.
Great, Scott, thanks. And another question here. So can you give us an example of a research program giving customer respondents, participants in the research, intelligence information in the way that you were talking about?
Actually, yeah, I could give an example. It'll probably take a couple minutes. I just encourage everybody to go and check out a recent blog on our website from Ventura Foods. And Ventura has recently released a member hub. And the member hub, and the whole idea of a member hub is, again, it's delivering the intelligence that Ventura is collecting from and about customers back to those customers. In their words, the engagement level is actually outperforming their marketing website and their social investment as well. So what we're seeing there is a case where they're delivering intelligence back to their participants in such an effective way that it's actually driving higher levels of engagement than anything else they do with their members and their customers in their organization. So it's just a much longer story. It's thorough. It explains exactly the way they're doing it. And there are a number of other customer examples out there, but healthcare is a great example. We all want to know more about our health. We all want to know what the insurance company knows about us, about the way that we use benefits, we don't use our benefits, staying healthier. So there's another great example in the industry. So a number of our healthcare customers are truly enriching the quality of the lives of their participants by delivering the insights they're generating back to those participants to make their lives better.
And very much in a similar theme, another question here: how do you get over the confidentiality fears of companies using research in sharing those learnings with customers? How do you prove creation value versus risk in that process?
Well, you don't have to share everything. And if you think about the people first, that's rule number one. You don't have to share everything. There's a lot of intelligence that you gather that those participants could benefit from that is not in your highly confidential or strategic roadmap. So that's really point number one. I would say that the second point there is being more sensitive to things that your participants might want to know from each other. If you're participating in a new product activity or a healthcare activity or a new technology demonstration, something like that, think about what the people participating would love to know. And I actually advocate adding a question or two in there that is on behalf of your participants, so that that's information that's definitely not in your strategic roadmap, but can be shared back. And if you think about it, it's intelligence that those participants would never get on their own, because it comes from 5,000 or 50,000 people who are like themselves.
Thanks, Scott. And the final question is from me. So when we first met, I noticed one of the words you used more often than most people was scalable. You started off the presentation today talking about scalable. Do you think many researchers underestimate the importance of finding scalable solutions?
Without a doubt, Ray. And you know what? I would put myself in that camp as I evolved through the industry. One, the appreciation for making money with our innovations. Somebody's got to sell it. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to help a customer interpret it. Somebody's got to help a customer scale it or distribute it through their organization. You could have the greatest idea in the world, but if it's only a one-off or, if it only delivers benefit in a non-scalable fashion, either your customers aren't going to be able to make the most of it, or you're not going to make any money from it. And so I do think that if you think about customers you have, or if you are a customer and you think about places in your organization that just don't embrace change as fast as you're bringing it, you get frustrated about why they want. I know I've got a better way. It's back to the point, if I've got 50,000 users of a variable in my organization or a tool in my organization, I'd almost rather have the last generation and have everybody using it effectively rather than having the new generation. So I do think scalability of of good is sometimes better than non-scalable great. I hate to say it, but I really, from my perspective, and having beat my head against a wall on a number of occasions, been on, both sides of the equation, on the customer side and on the delivery side, I think we all underestimate the complexities of scale and change as part of really being successful in this space.
Thank you, Scott. I couldn't agree more, but then I learned it from you.
Ray, thanks for having us.